What if a single political decision could quietly raise food prices across the United States? Not because of oil, not because of labor shortages, but because of something most people rarely think about: fertilizer. Right now, a major development involving Canada's potash supply is sending shockwaves through the agricultural world, and farmers across America are watching closely. Potash might not make headlines often, but it's one of the most critical ingredients in modern farming. Without it, crop yields drop, production costs rise, and food prices can eventually climb. Now reports suggest that a move targeting Canada's potash supply could put U.S. farmers in a difficult position, forcing them to pay more to keep their fields productive. So the big question is this: could this decision trigger a ripple effect that reaches grocery stores, family budgets, and the broader economy? Stay with this video until the end, because we're going to break down why this issue matters far more than many people realize, and what it could mean for farmers, consumers, and the global fertilizer market. To understand why this story is so important, we first need to look at what potash actually is. Potash is a potassium-rich fertilizer that helps crops grow stronger and healthier. It improves plant resistance to disease, increases yields, and supports soil fertility. In simple terms, potash helps farmers produce the food that fills grocery store shelves. Without a stable supply of it, agricultural productivity can suffer. Here's where Canada enters the picture. Canada is one of the world's largest producers of potash, and a significant portion of the fertilizer used by American farmers comes from Canadian mines. Over the years, the United States has relied heavily on this supply chain because it has been stable, efficient, and geographically close. Now imagine an animated explanation appearing on screen. A map highlights Canada's major potash mining regions, particularly in Saskatchewan, and arrows show how fertilizer shipments move south into the United States to support farms across the Midwest and beyond. That visual alone shows just how interconnected these two countries are when it comes to agriculture. But recent developments suggest that political and trade tensions could disrupt this relationship. When policies or tariffs target imported fertilizers, even small changes can dramatically affect costs. Farmers operate on extremely tight margins, and fertilizer is one of their biggest expenses each season. Let's look at a realistic case study to understand the impact. Consider Mark, a corn farmer in Iowa who plants hundreds of acres each year. To maintain strong crop yields, Mark relies heavily on potash-based fertilizer. If fertilizer prices rise significantly, Mark faces a difficult decision. He can either absorb the higher cost and reduce his profits, or cut back on fertilizer use, which could reduce crop yields. Either way, the pressure on his operation increases. Stories like Mark's are becoming more common whenever fertilizer markets experience disruption. Agricultural economists often point out that farmers cannot easily substitute potash with another product. Crops need potassium to grow properly, and the alternatives are limited. Now imagine a short interview segment with an agricultural policy expert. Experts frequently explain that fertilizer markets are extremely sensitive to geopolitical decisions. A tariff or supply restriction can ripple through the entire food production chain. What begins as a trade dispute can eventually affect everything from grain production to grocery prices. Another important factor is timing. Farmers typically purchase fertilizer months before planting season begins. If supply uncertainty emerges at the wrong moment, farmers may face higher costs right when they need to secure their inputs for the year. Let's pause for a quick Q&A moment, because many viewers might be wondering how this could affect them directly. One question people often ask is, if fertilizer prices rise, will food prices increase too? The answer is that it's possible. Higher input costs for farmers can eventually influence the price of crops like corn, wheat, and soybeans. Over time, those costs can work their way through the food supply chain. Another question viewers ask is, why doesn't the United States simply produce more potash domestically? The reality is that potash mining is highly specialized and geographically limited. Canada's reserves are among the largest and most accessible in the world, which is why the country plays such a dominant role in the global market. To put this into a broader context, let's compare fertilizer supply systems around the world. In Europe, many agricultural systems rely on a combination of domestic production and imports from multiple countries. For example, when analysts compare agricultural supply chains in Spain and other EU countries, they often note that diversification of fertilizer sources can help reduce dependency on any single supplier. However, building those diversified supply networks takes time and major investment. In the United States, the long-standing trade relationship with Canada has made fertilizer imports relatively predictable. But when political tensions enter the equation, that stability can suddenly feel uncertain. This is why agricultural analysts pay close attention to fertilizer supply chains. Potash might not be visible to consumers, but it plays a crucial role behind the scenes in global food production. Now picture another animated explanation appearing on screen. A simple chart shows how fertilizer costs make up a significant portion of total farm expenses. As that line rises, the farmer's profit margin shrinks unless crop prices increase enough to compensate. But there's another side to this story as well. Some policymakers argue that trade pressure can encourage domestic production and strengthen national supply chains in the long run. If fertilizer production within the United States expands, supporters say it could reduce reliance on foreign suppliers. However, critics warn that building new mining operations takes years and requires billions of dollars in investment. In the meantime, farmers still need fertilizer every planting season. Now let's imagine hearing directly from a farmer during a short interview segment. Many farmers say their biggest concern is unpredictability. Agriculture already involves risks from weather, market prices, and global demand. Adding supply disruptions to the mix can make long-term planning even harder. This situation also highlights how interconnected the global economy really is. A decision made in the political arena can ripple through trade markets, affect agricultural inputs, influence crop production, and eventually shape the prices consumers see at grocery stores. At this point, many viewers may be wondering what happens next. Trade negotiations, agricultural policies, and global fertilizer markets will all play a role in determining how this situation evolves. If supply remains stable, the impact could be limited. But if tensions escalate or restrictions expand, fertilizer markets could become more volatile. Now I want to turn this conversation over to you. Do you think the United States should rely less on imported agricultural inputs like potash, or is maintaining strong trade partnerships the better strategy? Your perspective matters, especially since food production affects every household. As we move forward, analysts will be watching fertilizer prices, crop planting decisions, and international trade developments closely. These factors will determine whether the ripple effects of this situation remain contained or grow into a larger agricultural challenge. If you've made it this far in the video, you're already ahead of many people in understanding how something as overlooked as fertilizer can shape the entire food economy. Stories like this show how global trade decisions can reach far beyond politics and directly influence everyday life. So if you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more updates on agriculture, global trade, and the economic stories that impact millions of people. And remember, sometimes the most important developments in the economy start with the resources we rarely think about, but absolutely cannot live without.